A prominent speaker at the Asian Financial Forum 2014 here in Hong Kong is Michael Smith. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Australian and New Zealand Banking Group, and he joins us from Melbourne. Thanks indeed for doing so. I wonder if I could really start by asking you for your outlook in 2014 for the banking industry in the Asia Pacific, bearing in mind that the economic performances of the United States, of Europe and China seem to be much better.
2014 is probably going to be a little better year than we've experienced since the crisis. And I think it's a combination of events. One, as you say, there's no doubt that Asia Pacific itself is doing much better off the back of Chinese growth, which is higher than expected. The US is definitely recovering, so that is helping global growth. And Europe seems to have bottomed out. But I think the important thing is that the world is getting a little bit more predictable again. It remains volatile, but I think that it is far more predictable, and markets are now much better at adapting to what will be inevitable issues that occur during the year.
And speaking of volatility in the marketplace, of course in Australia, in your home base, and in Japan, there seems to have been quite a lot of volatility recently. What's your outlook in 2014?
You know, I'm pretty optimistic about Australia. I think that the new government is more business friendly. I think that's going to play out in a positive way over the year. You know, I think they've had a bit of an awkward start, but that's the same of any new government. You know, they're learning the ropes. So I'm basically more optimistic about Australia. It is going through a transformation at the moment, and I think that you know, the country, it's a difficult transformation as it moves from the 20th century industries to the 21st century. But off the back of a continued mining boom, commodity prices remain relatively high. You know, I'm still pretty positive, and the agri sector is doing extremely well as well. Japan, I think, is more interesting in that obviously the whole easing has created you know, excess liquidity in Japan. You've had the adjustment of the value of the yen. That has stimulated industry in Japan in a way that I have not seen in my lifetime, and certainly, or my business lifetime, I should say. I would say that that's going to continue, and I think that as we hear about tapering in the US, the effects in Asia are going to be mitigated somewhat by a continued access to liquidity from Japan.
Now, turning to China, Mr. Smith, I wonder whether you'd comment on the reforms expected under the third plenum, particularly where that relates to banking, wealth management, for example, and venture capitalism, if there's going to be a greater degree of discipline in the Chinese market.
Well, I think that, you know, that says it all, actually. I think that there is. And quite clearly, what we're seeing is that economic reform, and particularly financial reform, are front and center of this new government's to-do list. That's good for China. It's good for the region. It's good for the world, particularly in financial services. So I think that the opportunities there are going to continue to expand.
Now, I wonder how you'd see Hong Kong as a market for acquisitions, despite the higher prices, and how you'd rate Hong Kong as a financial market.
Well, I think as a financial market, Hong Kong is absolutely an essential market to be in. If you're in the financial services industry and you're not in Hong Kong, then you'd have to question why. And I think that the advantages that Hong Kong has in terms of its stability, its rule of law, and indeed the depth of talent that it has, not only in banking but in the whole of the financial services industry, is something that's going to make it very difficult to replicate in the near term. Therefore, Hong Kong has huge advantage. It is also, I still think, the best way to access China, particularly for those companies and businesses who are inexperienced in dealing with Asia or with China in particular. You know, I think that the expertise you can get from Hong Kong in terms of developing those relationships into China is still absolutely essential. In terms of acquisitions, you know, I think you've got to look at acquisitions in Hong Kong again with a lens on China. And I think what is important is that the value of any business in Hong Kong is its future ability to move into China. And I think the problem has been that the valuations are very much looking in the rearview mirror about the historical value of a Hong Kong-based business, which is not appropriate anymore.
Now, given the larger portfolio for RMB instruments here in Hong Kong, would ANZ be looking towards 2014 for a larger range of products under the RMB?
Oh, absolutely, and certainly Hong Kong has been the centre of that development, and I think the previous HKMA boss Joseph Yam was very instrumental in getting Hong Kong as a centre of renminbi expertise and internationalisation. And that has played through. Norman Chan has picked that up and has moved that forward in a way that they are the preeminent players right now. And of course, ANZ has a significant operation in Hong Kong, and indeed the development of our renminbi business is significant. You also have to remember that Australia is probably one of the few countries in the world that has the flow of renminbi, or potential renminbi, in terms of its trade volumes, both exports and imports. And therefore, renminbi will play a more and more important part in Australia's development.
And will Shanghai be a larger player in the RMB internationally, as far as you can see that, into the future?
Yes, it will be. And I think the development of the free trade zone is going to be quite significant. And how the issue will be there, how they will create renminbi liquidity without creating cross-border issues between Shanghai Free Trade Zone and Shanghai itself and the rest of the country. So access to international renminbi is going to be very important. And if they do manage to absorb that pool of international renminbi, of course they will give Hong Kong a bit of a run for their money.
Mr. Smith, you're attending the Asian Financial Forum here in Hong Kong. What are you expecting to actually hear at the forum?
I particularly like this forum because it's the first one of the calendar year. And so it's always interesting to hear people's perspectives on how they are looking at the year ahead. It's a great time to do that. Everybody's just sort of recovered from the end of financial years and indeed the excesses of the festive season. So I think it is actually quite it's a very good forum to hear what people are thinking. And as far as we're concerned, I'm always interested to see what is happening from a China perspective. And Hong Kong is a great place to get that feel.
Mr. Smith, thanks very much for joining us.